So hi there and welcome back to the final part of this Battle Royale ring tutorial. It has got quite complicated, and in today's video we are going to run through the final sets of rules that we need to make this into something that is a fully functioning mode. Now I'm going to do things slightly differently in this video in that we aren't going to walk through the process of actually building it. I'm not going to talk you through the different rules as we drag and drop them in. I'm going to show you complete rules and complete blocks of code which you are more than welcome to copy as we go along. So the descriptions are going to be a little bit quicker than before, they're going to be a little bit looser. And the reason for that is I want to get as much content as I can into this video as possible before I leave it. Now, because this takes a different pattern to videos that I've done before, I'm very conscious that this may not work as well as my previous videos. So with that in mind, I am also going to include the URL for my portal experience in the description section for this video, and you are more than welcome, once you've completed this, to go through, check out my own code and compare that code to your own to make sure that you've got it right, and to be able to spend a little bit more time looking at it in your own time, seeing how things work. In this video we are going to go through lots of final little touches. So we're going to look at checking that the player is inside the ring or outside the ring and dealing damage if they are in the incorrect position. We're also going to add on to it a little ring shrinking mechanism, so moving the ring or after a period of time and shrinking it. We are also going to make sure that we disable the AI a little bit more strongly, make sure that the health is maximised so they can't be inadvertently destroyed, and also disable them a little bit more so that they can't be as dangerous as they potentially are, so they're a little bit dumber on the outside of the ring. We are also going to add a few other bits and pieces in there as you go along. You're going to see some little bonuses. As it's Christmas, I figured I'd try and get all of this content out at once, but as I say, if you don't follow the video, if you're finding this a little bit difficult because it is quite complicated, I will put the URL for this video in the description, and you can copy it, look at it, change it, do whatever it is that you need to do with it. I am very close to my 500 subscribers now. I was hoping to get there by Christmas. We don't have very long left before Christmas to get there. So if you haven't subscribed already, please do. If you find this useful, if you're looking forward to future content, don't forget to press the follow button. A tickle of the like button wouldn't do any harm, and sharing it with others is always appreciated. But for now, let's crack on with this and see how we get on. Now here we are in the rules editor, and you can see there's an awful lot of code just ready to go underneath, and what we're going to do is we're going to work slowly through each block of code. I'm going to explain what each block of code does as we slot it in and give you a little bit of time to copy that code as we go. Now if we get this code right, you're going to have an awful lot of additional functionality in your program, but I will also share the experience code and the URL for this complete code in the description for this video when I put it up, so that you can go to the URL and copy the code yourself if you are struggling. Obviously I don't normally do that. You really should be attempting to create this code yourself or copying it. There is a learning process that you need to go through, but given the fact that this code is so complicated, I am going to give it to you as well. Right, okay, so we're going to start off. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and this is the code that we've already created at the top. And we are going to first slot in whether the player is in the ring. So we're going to slot in the code that detects whether the player is in the ring. Now I'm just going to drag and drop that into place in our mod, and you can see there it is. So we're just going to have a little look at this and describe what's going on here. So the first thing is we're going to name the rule player in the ring, because that's what this code does. It detects whether the player is in the ring. It's going to be an ongoing piece of code, and it's going to be assigned to the player. That makes sense, because as the player moves, we want to get their position and detect whether they are still in the ring or not. The next part of this code is a condition that we're adding, and in this condition we are going to check first of all whether the player is not an AI player. So you can see we've got an and there, and then we say not get player state for the player is AI soldier, and that's going to check that they are not an AI soldier. So we don't want this rule to apply to AI soldiers. And in the second part of the and, we get the player states for the event player, and we need to check they're alive. So this rule will only run if they are not an AI soldier and they are alive. In the next part, we have a while loop, and we've seen these before. We want this ongoing rule to continue running all the time that the player is alive. So we put around this block of code a while loop, and the condition for that while loop to run is if the state of the event player is that they are alive. Okay, so inside the while loop, it is going to repeatedly run an if statement, and we can see this if statement as an if part. So if this part is true, and then it also has an else part. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to say if the player is outside the circle, let's do some damage to them, else tell them that they are inside the circle, and you should be able to see that from this block of code. Now again, we've got one of these really long blocks of code for the first if condition. You've got it there, so I'm just going to hide away the toolbox. And I know I've seen a couple of people mention this to me. I'm using Portal Pro at the moment, so we can get rid of that. Alright, and that just gives us a little bit more space to work on. I'll do a little video on Portal Pro at some point. But you can see we've got just a little bit more along here. So I'm going to scroll slowly along here so you can see. But we are going to check the distance between where the player is at the moment and the center of the ring. And if the player's distance from the center of the ring is greater than the radius of the ring, then that player must be outside. So we've got our if here, and then we've got the condition if greater than. And if we just have a look at greater than, you'll see that that needs two numbers, and it basically says if this number is greater than that number. So we're going to say the distance between the player's current position and the center of the circle, that'll be the first part, and then we're going to say if it's greater than the radius, so that's going in the second part. So this is going to be filled in with the distance between the player and the center of the ring, and that is going to be filled in with the value for the radius. So let's have a look. We've got distance between. So when we do distance between, let's have a look at the help. You can see we need two positions, the position that we are checking from and the position that we are checking to. So we need to check from the player's starting position or current position to the center of the ring. So let's have a quick look at that. So you can see this has two parts. This here is the first part. So what is the distance between the player's current position, get player states for the event player, and their position? That's the first part of this distance between rule. So we have the player's current vector position, their current position, just there, and now we need to get the center of the ring. We need to check the distance between the player's position and the center of the ring, and that's where this create vector comes into play. And you can see in order to create a vector we have three parts: the X part, the Y part, and the Z part. Okay, so we need to create a vector. We're going to set the X position to the center of the circle, the center of the ring. So get variable global pot center X, that is the X component. Now I'm just going to skip past the Y component for a moment, and we are going to get the Z position. So we've got the X, and on this box we need the Z position, and you can see we're just going to get the center Z position of the ring. So that's given us the X as the center position and the Z as the center position. Now if you think of that as a flat plane, that's your forward and backward, left and right, that's your midpoint between those. Now the get Y component is the strange part, and I've just highlighted that for you now. And you can see rather than taking some figure from the center of the ring, we are instead using the Y component for the current player. And you can see for the Y component we've got get Y component of the current player. We want their position, so that's the Y position that the player is currently at. Now, because the distance between rule works in sort of a sphere, if you think about it, now if we don't use the Y position of the player, we may find that some of the calculations aren't exactly right because the distance between works on the basis of a sphere. And where do you take your Y position from the center of the ring? If you set it to 0, and it turns out that the player is higher than that, that's going to play havoc with the calculations. Hopefully you understand that. If you don't, just use the Y component of the player's current position in order to create this vector. So we've got the first part of this distance between function. Let's just have a look. We've got greater than the distance between the player's current position and this vector we've created, and that will give us a calculation. And the vector that we've created is for the center X position of the ring, and the center Y position of the ring, and where the player's current Y position is, and we want to check the distance between that and the circle radius. It's that simple. I'm just going to show you that condition on screen. I'm going to scroll back a little bit, and we're going to go that. So if the distance between the player's current position and the center of the ring is greater than the radius. Okay. Right, so if it is greater than the radius, that must mean that they are outside the circle, and this next bit just deals with that. So we've got display a custom message. The message is you are outside the circle. We're going to place that in the header text, and we're going to display that -1, so that means it will display constantly, and it's going to display to the event player, and then we're going to wait for 0.1 second. Now you can also see inside this first if part here we have an additional if statement. Now this is some additional functionality that we're going to add to the ring, and you can see that it says if get variable global ring active deal damage to the player to event player. So every 0.1 seconds, if the ring is active, it's going to deal some damage to the player. Now this is a variable that we haven't created before. In actual fact, it's part of some additional functionality that we're going to add later. If you just want this code to work, what you can do is you can drag that out of there, place it there, and then just remove this if statement if you want. Just go back a little bit. But what I'm going to suggest you do at this point is add another variable, create another variable and call it ring active and make it a global variable. And what's going to happen is the ring is going to periodically move and shrink. Because the ring will move and shrink, so the player may end up outside of the circle once the circle has moved, we are going to give them a little bit of time. We're going to disable the ring while they make their way back inside the ring. So that's what this variable is going to take care of. So if you add yourself an additional variable, make it a global one, call it ring active, and make sure that the deal damage goes within that, that stops them from getting damaged if they are outside the circle but the ring is not active, and we'll add the ring active functionality later on. Now for the final part of this little rule that we've got going on, we've got the else part. The else part is pretty simple. Display a custom message inside circle in the header text, display that constantly to the event player and refresh it after a second. So wait 1 second and go around again. And that is our inside or outside of the ring rule. Just going to leave that there for a moment if you want to copy it and digest it. As I say, the only part of this that you may not need if you don't want to push this ahead any further than this is you won't need this if statement. You can just move the deal damage out and that will constantly or always deal damage to them if they are outside the circle. But I think this is going to be an interesting addition, so we'll work with that. So now that we've dealt with making sure we can detect whether the player is inside or outside the circle, let's add a few additional functions. So the first one that we're going to add is moving the ring from location to location and shrinking it as time passes. This is going to add the idea of the ever-closing circle to your game, and you can see that I've got a couple of rules on the screen. Actually, I've got a rule and a subroutine, and we're going to use these two rules together to create the effect that we want. So the first thing that we're going to do, you'll notice, is that I have a rule which is called the ring shrinker. It actually moves and shrinks the ring as it goes, and it is an ongoing event and it is a global event. So if you remember, any event that is ongoing, let's zoom in a little bit, needs to have a condition set in order for the actions to run. So we've just set a condition here, and we've just said this rule will run if the condition is that the game mode time remaining is greater than 0. So effectively it's going to run all the time. And then you can see it's a very simple set of actions. Now there are several ways of achieving the effect that I'm after. Here I've kept it quite simple. So we wait 30 seconds and run the move ring subroutine, wait 65 seconds and run the move ring subroutine again, then wait another 65 seconds and run the move ring subroutine. Now I will say that these times are very short, and if we were doing this in a normal Battle Royale mode, you'd probably want to set those to be significantly longer. So this waits 30 seconds, and you might want to wait 5 minutes, for example, before moving the ring. You also might want to work out how long the game time is going to be, and make sure that you add enough of these stages and keep shrinking the ring. So if we want to shrink the ring a little bit further, we can just duplicate these blocks of code, and it will shrink further and further depending on the number of these that you slot in there. So this will have 4 shrinks before it stops shrinking, and that last one will be the end position of the ring. So if you want more, just keep adding more. If you want longer time between the shrinking, add more time, and that actually might be a good idea. So that's the very simple rule that's going to shrink our ring, and I'm just going to move this up to the correct position. Let's zoom out a little bit, and let's place that in our set of rules that we have already. Let's just move that out of the way. There we go. So we've got our rule in place to shrink the ring, and we've just got to deal with this move ring subroutine now. So let's look at the move ring subroutine, because this is quite important. So this is the subroutine that is going to move the ring for us every time we run that move ring subroutine. You're going to have to create a new subroutine. Hopefully you can remember how to do that, but just a reminder, I need to untoggle the toolbox, and just down at the bottom we've got subroutines, and you can see these are the subroutines that I've created. We just create subroutine, and that will make the little brown block for us. Let's get rid of that. Okay. So what do we do in this move ring subroutine? Well, there's no condition, because we're just going to call it periodically whenever we want to. And you can see the first action is to display a game mode message telling them that the ring is moving and it has been temporarily deactivated. Now you can see that this next part is just setting all of the variables that we need in order to move the ring to the correct position. So you can see that the first variable that we're going to set is the ring active variable. Now if you set that earlier when I suggested it, we are now going to set this variable to false. So the ring is moving, so we are going to deactivate the ring. Set the global variable ring active to false. Then the next variable that we are going to set is a new variable. We've not seen this one before. We've got new ring direction. So you're going to need to create a new variable. You might want to do that now, and call that new variable new ring direction, and set it to be a global variable. And in this new ring direction variable, we are going to store a random number between 0 and 359. Now the reason for that is we are going to take the center point of our ring as it is, and we are going to choose a random angle to go to for the next ring. So you can imagine that if the ring is 360 degrees, this is going to pick a random direction to send the new point to. Once we've got that random direction, then the next part is to plot the center X and Z for the new position of the ring. You can see that. So this is quite a long piece of maths, but you can see this is how we are going to get our new ring position. Am I going to be able to show it all on the screen? Yeah, I'm just about. So we're going to add whatever the current center X is to the result of this calculation. And this calculation has 2 parts. It is multiplying whatever the circle radius is divided by 2. So that's going to have the radius in 2. So we're not going to stretch all the way out to the edge of the ring. We're going to have it. We're going to pick a center point somewhere in the middle. And we are going to get the sine from the degrees, and we're going to get a variable, a global variable, new ring direction. So that is going to get the sign of this new ring direction. And if you remember the way that works, you might want to go back to the beginning of the maths, but that's going to give us the plot point on the edge of that circle radius. So it's going to have the radius as it currently is, and then it is going to plot a point on the edge of that new radius to be the new x position, and we're going to add that to the current x. So you can see that underneath we've got the plot center z. So we're going to set the center z position, and this is exactly the same calculation, except we are going to get the cosine of the new ring direction. And again, if you go back to video 1, you'll see how this gets us a z position or a coordinate on the edge of the ring. So that way we're going to get a new x position and a new z position, which will be placed at some position on the outer circle of the radius when it's cut in half. So the final step is to set the circle radius, and we are going to shrink the circle radius by reducing it down to 70% of its old size. So while we're getting a plot point which is halfway up the radius or halfway down the existing radius, we're going to make the circle radius itself just a little bit bigger than that. Now you can mess around with these figures if you want, there's nothing to stop you. So for example, if you only want the circle to shrink by 20% on each ring change or each move of the ring, you can change that value. I'm just going to change it back to 70%. You might want to have a think about how much you want it to reduce and how many stages you've got to your game and how small you want it to be. Experiment a little bit, see where you end up and see what seems right to you. You can also mess around with this, the ring coordinates. You can bring that close to the centre or further away from the centre by altering the amount that it's divided by. I have to say this seems like a reasonable calculation to me, but that's entirely your choice. So that's all of the variables dealt with. We're going to disable the ring by setting the ring active to false. Choose a random ring direction. We are going to plot the new center x, plot the new center z, do a quick calculation for a new circle radius, which is 70% of the old circle radius, and last but not least, in this small section just there, we are going to use this to create the ring coordinates. Now this subroutine is the one that we created originally right back at the very beginning, so I'm just going to go back up, just remember where we're up to, and you will remember it's a long way up at the top now. It's quite a big block of code that we've got going on here, but you'll remember that creating the ring coordinates basically created an empty array and then filled that array with positions for the AI players. When we run this set ring coordinates with the new calculations, what will happen is the array will be filled with new coordinates, and when the AI are set to the coordinates in the array, they will go to those new positions. So I'm going to move back down again. So we're just on the final stretch here. Okay. These final bits aren't really to do with moving the ring, it's really more to do with just making it into something that becomes a little bit more playable. So you can see, just after we've created the new ring coordinates, in actual fact, because all of the AI players are continually set to the coordinates in that array, you'll see the ring move straight away. We have a little loop, and this loop is going to loop this variable from 60 to 0, and it's going to move that variable by -1. So in effect, this timer variable is going to count from 60, and it's going to have -1 off it, so it's going to have 59, then 58, then 57. So we're going to get a timer, a countdown from 60 to 0. Every second it's going to -1 off. So in order to make this work, you're going to have to create a variable, another one. This one's going to be a global variable, and you are going to call it timer. It's just going to be used in this loop. And you are going to make sure that you loop variable, global variable timer, from 60 to 0 by -1. And then you can see all that we do in this loop is display a custom message. So you can see we've got this message, the parentheses are replaced by whatever variable is here. So we've got the ring is deactivated. You have this many seconds to enter the ring. And because we are using the timer variable in place of those parentheses, it's going to display the current timer, and you can see we've got a wait for 1 second in the loop. So it's going to display a custom message. It's going to say 60 seconds because that's what the timer is set to. It's going to wait a second and go back to the beginning again. That's going to get reduced to 59. So in fact, you're going to have a countdown timer working there. That's quite a useful block of code actually for other projects. Don't forget, in these display custom messages, there are some additional things that you need to put in there, otherwise it will not work. We've got custom message slots. I'm going to put this in message text 1, so it's just going to be underneath the header, and it is going to be displayed for 1 second. That's because we're going to constantly replace it as we go in the loop. Also notice, we are not displaying this to a specific player or team. All players are going to see this message. They're all going to see the ring is deactivated. You have this many seconds to get inside the ring. So that's going to be the countdown timer, and then as you can see right at the end, after that loop has finished, the ring is going to be reactivated. So we're going to set ring active to true, and then we're going to display a game mode message saying caution, the ring is now active. And that is our move ring subroutine. Just going to leave that on there for a second. We'll just have a quick run through again. Okay, so remember, actually let's just scroll up a little bit. Remember that we've got this ongoing global rule which will run when the game mode time remaining is greater than 0. It's going to wait for a period of time, then run the move ring subroutine, then wait again, then move ring, wait, move ring, and so on. And you can have as many of those as you want. Just bear in mind that each move ring will reduce the size of the ring by 70% or whatever you've set it to, and also bear in mind that these times might be a little bit quick for you. 30 seconds isn't a very long amount of time for a ring to move. You're going to see things rapidly move. Then we've got our little move ring subroutine. In this subroutine, once we move the ring, we're going to tell them that the ring is moving and we've deactivated it. We're going to set the ring active to false. We are going to choose a new ring direction, set a new plot center X position. I can see you can't really see that, so let's move that along. Plot a new center Z position, set a new circle radius, which is 70% of the old one, and then fill the ring coordinates back up with the new positions for the AI soldiers. Then we're going to loop constantly for 60 seconds, telling them that the ring is deactivated and they have this many seconds to return. Then wait for a second. Once that loop is ended, we are going to set the ring back to being active, so I'll set ring active to true, display a game mode message telling them that the ring is now active again. And if you do that, you now have a ring that is active for a period of time, then it gets deactivated and moves, and then reactivates for all players. And if you've got that code in there, you should be ready to go. Just a reminder that in our checking the ring, the player is in the ring, in order for the ring active to work, you must make sure that you put this if statement in there. Remember earlier on I said if you didn't want to deal damage, if you want to deal with the ring moving, you could put the deal damage there. But in this case, now let's just move that, or actually I can just undo. We do want the damage to be dealt only if the ring is active, and hopefully all of that makes sense. Right, there's just a couple of other bits and pieces that we're going to put in here. I'm not going to spend too long on these. The first thing is, in order to just make sure that the ring is active when players start, we are going to move this set variable. We're going to add an additional line to on game mode started. Just after the ring coordinates have been set, we are going to set the variable global ring active to be true. You can see that just there. Okay, so that will mean that when the game mode is started, it's going to set all of the variables to begin with, create the ring coordinates, and set the ring active to be true. So just check that you've got that all set up on game mode started, and you're going to set the ring active to be true. And so now there were just a couple of things that I just wanted to add onto this just to finish it off. Some of these are to do with the AI player. So when the AI player is deployed, we want to make sure that they can't be killed in game. So we're just going to fix that. We don't want them to be able to be shot and die, because that's going to ruin the ring really. They do generally do some weird things themselves, but we don't want to help them along. You might find that they automatically redeploy, but we're going to just kind of fix the issue of us being able to kill them. We don't want that to happen. So when the AI player is deployed, when an AI player is deployed, you can see that we've got these two set variables. You need to just find the assign AI number rule, and we're just going to drop this additional action inside there. So set player max health to 1000. 1000. We can see that. So when the AI is deployed, we're going to set the maximum health to 1000. That's the first part of making these AI players invincible. And then in addition, I'm just going to scroll across a little bit. I've written another little rule which you might want to take. And this rule just basically disables them, makes them kind of inactive. And if you remember in the first video, I did say that sometimes they do some weird things. So in this one, we're just going to disable them and make sure that they are super strong. So you can see we've got disable AI. The event is ongoing, so it's going to be continuous and it's going to apply to a player. The condition is going to be that the player is an AI soldier. So we've got this and again. Are they an AI soldier? And are they alive? So this condition is going to continuously run while that player is alive. And then last but not least, we've got a little while loop in there that while the player is alive, we've done these kind of rules regularly before, and we are going to heal them for 999, heal the event player by the event player for 999. We are going to force them to switch to their melee weapon, so they won't get their gun out. They will be a bit stabby, but that's something totally different. And then we are going to wait for 0.01 seconds by doing that all over again. So this little rule that we've got here will, while the AI player is alive, heal them for 999, force them to switch to their melee weapon, and wait 0.01 seconds before doing that all again. We're just going to slot that in to our set of rules. Doesn't really matter where we place it. You can see that the code has got awfully long. We'll just drop that in there. Okay, so now we have dealt with the AI. We make sure that when they are deployed originally, we give them 1000 max health, and then we disable them by continuously healing them, forcing them to switch their inventory and waiting. And that in conjunction with continuously move them back to the position that we've set in the coordinates array will keep them disabled. Just going to leave that there for you for a moment. So that pretty much brings us to the end of this tutorial. We have written a lot of code if you've got this far, and it is really quite complex. There are a couple of additional things that you might have seen in the demos that I've shown, and that would be the ring rotating. So if the ring is active, you will see that the players themselves rotate around the circle, and you'll see that when the ring is inactive, they stop. So it's quite a good indicator of whether the ring is active or not. I'm not going to dwell too much on that. In actual fact, I did promise you that I would leave the code or the URL to the code for you to be able to copy in the description of this video. So it will be there for you to be able to have a look. So I'm not going to spend too much time just dwelling on this, but you can see we've got an additional rule called ring rotator. It's a global one, and it will run when the ring is active. So this is going to start running when the ring's active, stop running when the ring is deactive. That makes sense. Then we've got while the ring is active, wait 0.1 seconds, and then rotate the ring. So you can see that's how that rule works. I'm just going to drop that rule into my finished code down at the bottom. Let's get that in there. We'll pop that just there. Okay, and then you can see that that rotate ring just there is a subroutine, and you'll see that that subroutine is this one here. I'm not going to run through this subroutine, however, I am just going to leave it on the screen for you momentarily. But all it does is it runs through the array that we have set up for all of these player positions and moves them around a little bit by a specific angle. I'm just going to leave that there for you a moment. So you're going to need at least one additional variable. You're going to need this ring angle increment, and you're going to need to be able to use that subroutine. But like I said, I will leave the code in there. You can read that to your heart's content and have a look at how that works. And then in order for this to work, you do also need to set the ring angle increment down here in this subroutine where it says create ring coordinates. You need to set that variable there. Don't worry too much about that. It really is just a kind of added bonus, and for those that have got this far and want to try and understand that, like I said, I will leave the code there for you. Now in previous videos we also looked at deploying players inside the ring, or deploying players at specific coordinates, and you can see this is the final little block that I'm just going to add to it, and you can see that this deploys the player in the center of the ring. I'm not going to go through random coordinates or random deploy positions in the ring for now. Those things you can have a look at and experiment with, but for now I'm just going to move this rule into my mod, just there. So you can see if you just want to deploy your players in the center, we've got a condition that just checks that they're not an AI soldier and then teleports them to the center X position of the ring, the center Z position of the ring, and places them at 1000 Y, which is really, really high in the sky, and everybody will parachute drop in from the center of the ring. Now clearly, if you want them to drop from random positions inside the ring, you're going to have to experiment with random numbers, getting different positions within the radius of the ring, and using sine and cosine to get random coordinates from inside the ring. That takes us a little bit further out of this video. This video has been quite long, but we have got an awful lot in there. This is a complete kind of base for a battle royale game. You can plug other rules in there if you want, but we've got some cool stuff going on in here that you can change and manipulate to your heart's content, and hopefully we've learned a lot as we've gone along. This is a very complicated project even at this stage without the additional rules, and it just goes to show that in actual fact if you want to create some really, really complex modes you can do, but they do take an awful lot of time to piece together. Thanks very much for watching. As always, if you've got something from this video, if you've learned something, if you've enjoyed it, and if you think that future content might be useful to you, please do click the subscribe button. I'm very close to the 500 target that I set myself for Christmas. A couple of days left for me to get there. It would be really, really wonderful if I could get there for Christmas and start sending out messages. If you've really enjoyed it, if you want to keep up with future content, don't forget click the like button and the follow button so you'll get notified as my new videos come out, and obviously the share button would be greatly appreciated. I've got a lot of new content coming up in the new year. I'm going to go back to shorter videos for a little while. This has been quite an undertaking, as you can see, and I want to go back to giving you some small snippets of code that solve some of the problems that you've been having just recently. For now though, I'll see you shortly. Take care.